Hi everyone, and welcome to this SNOGS talk on decolonizing global health. My name is Maddie Boyers, and I used to be the president of the SNOGS Society last year. And SNOGS is a student society. It stands for Student Neonatal Obstetric and Gynecology Society, and we're from the University of Liverpool. And we've been asked to do this session today and discuss decolonizing global health. In the UK recently, there has been really big attention on the Black Lives Matter movement. And this movement has been eye-opening for many reasons. And it has really highlighted some inequalities to health with the Black community, and something that COVID has also highlighted over the past few months. So this has been a really important topic, kind of racism, decolonisation, inequalities in health, and it's all kind of coming together. And so for this session today, we're discussing decolonising global health, and it seems really appropriate to kind of take this opportunity to discuss global health and racism in global health, and we're really going to try and link it back to us as students and our perception of it as well. As a white British female, I felt a bit unsure as to whether I could discuss this issue. It is really sensitive, and I have limited knowledge and experience on the topic, but I do think it's a useful opportunity to discuss it, and I'm really happy to do so. As the session today will involve interviewing other people and getting their ideas, and people that have more experience on it than I do. So I am studying medicine at the University of Liverpool. I'm in my 5th year now, and 5th and last year. And last year I did a master's in international public health at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. And despite doing medicine and the international public health course, I still have quite little knowledge on kind of colonisation of global health and decolonising of it now. But I think this session will be really interesting for everybody to get a bit of background information on it. So the session today will run with, it starts by me interviewing 2 University of Liverpool students. They've done some recent work on decolonising the medical curriculum, which has been really interesting. So we're going to talk to them about that. And then we're going to cut to Denise, who is from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She's a PhD student and has recorded for us to share today a definition of decolonising global health, and really explains it really well for us. Because especially for me, it was quite a new term. I didn't really understand it, and she describes it really well for us. So look forward to that. And then we interview some students and professors. Hi everybody. For this section of the talk, we've been joined by Abby Clinch and Jaden Gittings, who are 2 second-year medical students from the University of Liverpool, shortly going into 3rd year. And they've actually, over the past few months, been doing some work on decolonisation and looking into the medical curriculum. So I've got them here today to talk a little bit about what they've been doing. So hi and welcome.
Hi. Hey.
Please, can you tell everybody today a bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah. Sorry.
So in about May time, me and Jaden had a FaceTime, and we were discussing a book that we'd both been reading about Black female university students and their experience, and almost how contrasted and different that was to the experience of white middle class university students. And from that, the discussion went on until 1 a.m. and we started talking about how the themes that came up in the book also came up in our medical curriculum. Mm-hmm. And I guess from that, it almost sparked in us. We were like, do you know what, this is something we can make a change in. And from that, we were like, right, how can we do this? And we decided we were going to write a letter in some form to the medical school. So yeah, that was basically what we did.
So we started up a WhatsApp group chat. I think it was the next day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we kind of got some students from years 1 to 4 and basically gave the premise of what we wanted to do. And the aim was to write a letter, but also not to just accuse any, medical school of not doing things correctly, but we really wanted to highlight areas that we thought could be changed, and also suggest these changes, like ways that could be, the course could be changed.
Yeah.
And improve to provide more of an equitable service for all of our patients.
Yeah.
So that was the real aim of this, was not to accuse anyone, but really to help suggest ideas on where students thought things could progress.
Yeah.
We had a great group chat of 8 of us in total. So it was Abby and I, Gemrula Arawale, Hazel Wusu Yanama, Bayo Ibadapo, Portia and Marco Tauya, Korosh Pavisi, and Roxana Stobiecka. But yeah, we really couldn't have done any of that without all of those people. So it's really important for us to mention those and say thank you.
A big shout out to all of them.
Yeah, definitely.
So you all came together as students, which I think is really important, and like future doctors, and you've really like tried to make a difference and do something about it was massive, like the Black Lives Matter movement, and especially for like young people, social media, it was everywhere. I think that what you've actually taken that and, like you said, tried to come up with how things can change instead of just I don't know. Yeah,
definitely. So what really led us into it was actually quite a little bit before, because obviously it was the death of, really tragic death of George Floyd that kind of propagated the Black Lives Matter movement again. Mm-hmm. But we were reading the book, Taking Up Space, which is published by Murky Books, and we're big Stormzy fans. So we read this book, and it was really, really good, and it was really interesting for us. And it was actually slightly before the movement that we thought that this is something we should be working on. Actually, by the time we came to finish it, the whole conversation of society was about race and privilege and, the unfair treatment of people of colour in the world. So actually, we all felt, I think it was quite apt at the time to finish it and send it off to the medical school at that time, because institutions in general were being really receptive to this kind of work from students, and were trying to do the work themselves as well. So it was kind of that energy from the Black Lives Matter movement, and also the energy of, I suppose, being, like you said, future doctors. We're not quite doctors yet, so we do have that kind of bright-eyed, fresh faces, we want to change the world kind of thing. So we use that sort of energy to get work done.
I think that, like, leading on for that as well, like, obviously as medical students, a lot of us in our interviews will sit down and be like, we want to make a change, we want to make a difference. And I feel like when this happened, we couldn't really overlook it. Like, we felt like we had to do something about it. And I think that then from that, we had like that, like Jaden says, that fresh outlook, almost as only being 2 years into the course, but we've got like this open view on being able to identify areas for improvement. Again, not accusing anyone, but being able to like quite analytically approach it, I think, was how we went about it. And I think we really offered up some really productive solutions that the reaction we got back was that the solutions we'd given, some of them were already being enacted, but also that it was a very warm and like welcoming response to having something that was quite productive and easy to enact, I think. So that was positive.
So what was kind of like what's your aim? Was it more about students, or was it more about patients or university? What was that?
Sorry, go on.
I think that so for us, we were aware that very, very good, but like a lot of students at the university were doing like individual projects together. And I think that for us, from what we could gather, there seemed to be a focus on student experience, which is incredibly important. So we sort of felt we wanted to focus more on patient experience. And so from that, I guess our goal was, how can we improve these future doctors' education to ensure that the health inequalities that currently exist can be changed, or at least we can contribute to a change for that by the time that we get to being qualified doctors.
Yeah, oh, that's great. And like you said, you've had a good response, which is really good. And that's all you can ask for, really, like starting conversations, making change. Like, things don't happen overnight, but it's really great to hear that moving in the right direction with that. And the topic of today is kind of decolonizing global health and looking at it on a bigger scale. Was that something that you'd thought about at all?
Yeah, I'd say that for us as medical students, I think the only time we really get a lot of exposure to global health is in one theme of our curriculum, and it's like public, preventative and global health. And we did focus on that ourselves in the letter, but only very briefly. And I think that because the way we're taught is quite basic principles and basic models, it was more how can we apply that to understand patient care better.
Yeah.
So I think that for us, we didn't have much exposure to the decolonising global health movement.
Yeah.
But again, I'd say that the approach we took to doing the letter, analysing the cause, and suggesting easily implementable changes in some ways is, I guess, something that could be replicated across any course or any curriculum, any career. So I guess that from our side, that would be our view on it, is that even though what we did isn't directly related, it's something that could be replicated.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Being at the same medical school, I didn't really get that much, or I didn't feel like I knew that much about global health, especially the origins of it and the history of it. But it, again, is really important, and we're having these conversations now, so that is good. Well, have you got anything else you'd like to share with the conference today? Have we covered everything?
Again,
I think it's really important to say thank you for all of the people that worked with us. Say thank you. Pardon?
A team effort.
Oh, 100%. And we wrote the article with the B&J opinion, which was really helpful for us, I think, to kind of let out some of the emotions that we had felt over this. So we wrote a little piece on student activism and the need for collaboration between students and universities, and I think that was a really important article actually that we wrote. How
can people find that? What was the name of it?
So I think we wrote, I think the name of it is The Role of Student Activism, Decolonizing the Globe, Decolonizing the Curriculum. Okay. So yeah, it's available on BMJ Opinion. And we kind of wrote it after we had released the first open letter onto Twitter, and it gained quite a bit of traction. And then we were asked for our opinions on what we felt writing it, what we actually felt about the topic, and how we thought that process could be improved, like students working with the university. And actually, I think it's got quite a good reception from students and the university alike. So yeah, I think that was really important to do afterwards. And I think that's pretty much it from me.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks so much.
Thanks to you. Thanks to you as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, well, I'm just glad that we can share what you've been up to with everyone at the conference today. So thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye. To hear their experiences of decolonizing.
Hello, and welcome to Decolonizing Global Health. My name is Denise Glover, and I'm a PhD student at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. I've been asked by Liverpool SNOGS to give an introduction to decolonizing global health and why it is relevant in our current times. The decolonization of countries began in the 1950s. However, the field of global health, science and academia continues to be influenced by colonialism, with some even saying that we're in an era of neo-colonialism. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement have shone a light on the pre-existing structural inequalities. As such, many are calling for the decolonization of global health to make global health research and teaching more equitable and remove power imbalances. Colonization is defined as an action or process of settling among and establishing control over indigenous people in an area. In this sense, colonization in the field of global health and research refers to the imposition of decisions and solutions on indigenous communities by Western researchers and practitioners without involving those affected. As such, global health is a term that is reflective from only one perspective. The practices and ideologies of colonialism exist among all structures and actors, including, but not limited to, researchers, policymakers, practitioners, funders and funding, international bodies, academic institutions, and publications and publishers. The history of global health can be traced back to the study of tropical medicine and infectious diseases in formerly colonized states within British Empire rule. When you look at the history of medical research, the role of colonialism cannot be disputed for having detrimental effects on previously colonized nations. The histories of the oppressed and the oppressor in global health research play a vital role in current research practices and how indigenous communities seek help. The evidence of colonialization on global health can be seen within our academic institutions, be it in the name of our institutions or statues of colonial neighbours and slave traders. As the National Union of Students state, British universities are the products of colonialism. The process of decolonizing global health seeks to ask the question, how do we decide what research is conducted? Who is funding the research? Who is conducting the research? And who benefits from conducting said research? Additionally, decolonization in research and global health is not just involving people in developing and implementing interventions, but it's allowing people a seat at the table and for them to speak at the table. The term decolonizing global health is not a new term. However, in recent years, it has gained a lot of traction. Staff and students within universities across the world have and continue to develop decolonizing global health groups in an effort to challenge the status quo and dismantle colonial and oppressive structures and practices in teaching, research, and careers. There are a growing number of student and staff-led DGH groups, such as those at Duke University, the University of Edinburgh, Harvard Chan's School of Public Health, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and Karolinska Institute. There are increased efforts to decolonize academic institutions, with conferences and seminars focused on decolonizing global health, networking groups, and the formation of guidance reports and tools, such as those produced by the Higher Education Policy Institute. In 2015, the Rose Must Fall campaign called for the statue of Cecil Rhodes to be taken down in South Africa. And in June of 2020, protesters in Oxford demanded for the removal of his statue at Oriel College, where he studies. The Rose Must Fall Oxford group has also called for the removal of the statue of slave owner Christopher Cordington at All Souls College, and for increased representation of BAME students and staff. In June of 2020, UCL demanded denamed spaces and buildings named after two prominent eugenicists, Francis Galton and Carl Pearson. This comes after the 2020 release of a report on UCL's historical links to eugenics commissioned by UCL in 2018. However, whilst there is an effort to decolonize global health, an investigation conducted by the Guardian newspaper found that only a fifth of universities in the UK have committed to reforming their curriculum to confront the harmful legacy of colonialism. Given the COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, we cannot continue to ignore the structures that have and continue to oppress Black, Indigenous, and people of colour. This is why the process of decolonization has never been more important. Today that you've gotten a broader understanding of what decolonizing global health is and its relevance in our current times. Thank you very much for listening and enjoy the rest of the session.
In global health, and then we go to our SNOGS committee and have a bit of a discussion and a roundup. Okay. Hi, Bhavna.
Hello.
Everybody, this is Bhavna. She's a medical doctor from India who is also at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine and currently doing her Masters in International Public Health, and has previously done her diploma in tropical disease and hygiene at Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. So thank you very much for joining us today. So what I would like to ask you is, what does decolonizing global health mean to you?
From what I've read and what I've learned over the past, I don't think there's one particular definition that suits. I think it's just a completely new movement that is against the colonial legacy, and that's trying to make global health more equitable and reduce the power imbalance between different nations.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. So we're doing the same course this year, and I personally don't feel like we've kind of learned that much about the history of global health. So kind of before this interview, was this something that you'd thought about?
I did think about it. It's a yes and no, because throughout your journey in the field of medicine, you do come across these moments where you stop and question and think, but you cannot pinpoint the reason.
Yeah.
It's because there's this coloniality that's been embedded in you, whether it's comfortably or uncomfortably or consciously or unconsciously, and you can't pinpoint it. So I didn't think about it that much, but once I started looking for degrees in tropical medicine and public health, I learned that most of these degrees are offered by high-income countries.
Yeah.
And in countries where it's very hard for people in low-income countries to even apply for a visa, or the tuition price is so high. So just like, it makes me think that when you're offering degrees which are supposed to be towards a low or middle income country, and you're giving it somewhere else, how does it serve the purpose, and how does it help in capacity building? And and once I learned more about the history of our own college, of our own school, Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, it makes one think about, this as well. And it's also, as you learn over the last couple of months, as we learned, it just makes you realize that global health isn't global after all, because when it benefits, like the courses, the conference, the publications, everything benefits people in the high income country. It doesn't benefit anyone in the low income country. So, yeah.
That is such an interesting point of view, and thank you so much for talking to us today. I think we've got a lot of people listening today from all over the world, and I think that you've brought up a really interesting point there about going to these high income countries to study. And I think for me, living in England and already living in Liverpool, it wasn't something that I thought about. So thanks very much for bringing that to our attention today.
No,
thanks, Davina.
Bye.
Panel of today's session. So I hope Hi Percy, thanks so much for joining us. So for everyone watching today, Percy's joining us all the way from Canada, and me and Percy are both studying international public health at Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and Percy also has done a degree previously in Canada, which was a biology degree, and minored in applied ethics. So thanks so much for joining us, and with the time difference and everything. So the question that I wanted to ask you today is, do you see inequalities in global health as an issue?
Absolutely. I think that when you think about global health as an entire profession, as an entire component of our health structure, global health has kind of been created to respond to inequalities. And I think that it's important, like the topic that you're discussing and thinking about decolonizing like global health, I think is really important when you're thinking about inequalities, because so many of the inequalities that exist in the world are due to colonization and the continued effects of colonization. And I think that making it more decolonized, or at least attempting to, is really, really important, because the inequities that we see in global health, both within and between countries, between like the global south and the global north, all of those things are so intertwined with colonialism that we're never going to be able to address them if we don't also try and address the legacy of colonialism, for sure.
Yeah, that is really true. And I think that especially with like the Black Lives Matter movement at the minute, it's all just been a real movement, and I'm hoping that even just us talking about it today can really just like get people talking about it and thinking about it more. So yeah, I agree, it's all built on like inequalities, and we really need to think about it. But as a student in international health, we've learned for a whole year about public health and different systems and stuff, but is this something that you had thought about kind of before this interview?
I think, being a Canadian, I also am on the west coast of Canada, which I would say is generally a more progressive area of Canada. I definitely have thought about colonialism and decolonization in the context of Canada, because Canada exists on stolen land, and a lot of people don't really know the history of how the Americas were created, or it's very kind of whitewashed, and they're like, oh yes, they went there, they ate dinner with the indigenous people and it was all good, when that's really not what happened. Yeah. So I've definitely thought about and tried to engage with decolonization within the context of like Canada and my experience as a Canadian. And I think that it comes into play a lot when we look at like global issues. And one thing that I found that was interesting going to school in the UK is like the UK, like the British Empire was one of the biggest colonizers in the history of our planet, right? And it was interesting to see the ways that acknowledging that was sometimes a part of our curriculum and sometimes wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can't acknowledge that it happened, I think it's cowardly, first of all. And I think it just comes from a point of shame that is not unjustified, but is selfish in a lot of ways. Because when we have these conversations about trying to decolonize and trying to make a difference, and if a huge portion of that conversation is taking up trying to address the shame of those that have benefited from the systems that are in place, like, you're just kind of perpetuating that once again.
Yeah.
So it's something that I like thought of before this interview and even like before coming to the UK to do my degree. I don't think that it was talked about enough in the course of our degree for sure. And I think that it really plays out in subtle ways and more overt ways. And I think that having conversations like this and starting to include it and normalizing having these conversations, because they are difficult, especially if you've never had them before.
Yeah.
But they need to happen. So I think it's really great that this is coming up as a conversation point within this conference. And hopefully it will help to make those conversations a bit easier and give folks the language and the push to start thinking about not only their own role in colonization and then subsequently potentially decolonizing global health and just like their lives in general, their individual roles, their roles within their institutions, and then the roles that their institutions play within the global health landscape. I think it's really important.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks so much for your answers. I completely agree. And I'm so glad that us as students can have these discussions and hopefully like be the researchers of the future and just kind of get involved with these conversations and like self-reflect and I think it all starts from here, doesn't it? And like you said, it can be really difficult, but really great points brought up there. Thanks so much for talking to us today.
You're welcome.
Hi, so now we're joined by Professor Andrew Weeks, and thank you very much for joining us today. And the question I would like to ask you is, do you think global health needs decolonizing?
I don't think global health per se needs decolonizing. I don't think the concept is wrong. I think we are a global village and we all need to come together to address health, and actually addressing health in the different silos of India alone or Uganda alone or UK alone isn't sensible for any of us. We can all learn from each other, and actually, as the world communications open up, we're becoming interdependent. And you can just see from the coronavirus outbreak, this is not a Chinese problem. Actually, it's a global problem. Yeah. So global health per se is not does not need decolonizing. I think some of the decision makers do need decolonizing, and I guess you need to think about what colonization means, but in a sense it's a form of racism, and I think that there is a perception amongst some holders of power in the UK that somehow there's a superiority of British people over others, and maybe each culture thinks that themselves. Maybe that's just because what we're used to, and somehow we assume that a measure of intelligence is how well you can speak English, how well you dress, how well you know the etiquette, how well you can write a fully formed, grammatically correct sentence. And of course, that's completely nonsense. That's nothing to do with intelligence. That's to do with how you're brought up and where your origins are. But there's a perception sometimes amongst people who haven't been exposed a lot to other cultures that if you can't write proper English, and if you speak with a funny accent, or if your culture is different, then clearly you're not as intelligent as we are. So actually we'd better make the decision for you, and we'll show you what to do to make yourself sort of correct. Now, and to me, that's clearly a racist perception. And I think that those of us who've worked a lot overseas, or indeed brought up overseas, I think when you know people overseas, you go, oh, these are people from different cultures and they've got different knowledge, but there's no difference in sort of intelligence. And the same as if I go into a Ugandan village, and I'm sure I make all sorts of stupid errors, and people are far too polite whilst I'm there, but I'm sure there's loads of tittering and giggling when I leave at, look at how he tried to use his hands to feed. He didn't even know how to use his hands to eat the food, you know. What an idiot. This chap's supposed to be a professor. And it's, I would, if they said, oh, he's clearly an idiot, I'd say, well, I just haven't learned that. That just isn't my background. It doesn't mean that I'm less intelligent. It just means, you know, I was never taught how to do that. And it's true, I don't know what the best grass for a goat is to eat. Maybe that's me being stupid, but I just have never learned that. And so I think the same sort of things you can, we often put on our own culture as being the perfect culture, and then anything different to that means the lack of intelligence. And so now, as I say, those of us who've worked a lot overseas, I think we realise that everybody has very similar spreads of intelligence, and what we've got actually is different skills. And the ideal global health team brings together all those skills. Yeah. And so in the same way that if I'm running a study in Uganda, there's no point in me trying to make decisions about Ugandan culture. Actually, the people to make it are the people who know about those things. Yeah. Whereas maybe I've got different skills which I can add in. The trouble with global health, though, is that sometimes the decision makers, the people on the ground, I think, don't have colonial issues. They don't have racist issues, most of them. But the trouble is that there's some people who are very recently connected to working with other cultures, or indeed those who are power brokers, who make the ultimate decisions, who may be politicians, they may be government officials, and really don't have that much knowledge, and they're making decisions for political reasons rather than because of an internal knowledge of global health. And those are the ones who make the decisions, and those are the ones who are then going, no, we won't do that. No, these people are clearly not as intelligent. They used a semicolon instead of a full stop. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Don't trust them with our money. And those often have quite a lot of power, people there. So I think there is a colonial element to a racist element to some of the global health work. I don't think it's necessarily due to the concept of global health, but I think sometimes the people with power don't listen as much as they might do to those on the ground.
Yeah, well, they're really interesting points. Thank you for sharing that with us. And you're really experienced, have been spent a lot of time in Uganda. What would you say to maybe like future researchers or decision makers to kind of act on this, or how
could we change it? Are you thinking?
Mm.
Well, I think you need to be humble. Mm-hmm. I think actually is what I think that humility is important, both from a researcher's point of view, to say, actually, I don't know everything, and I'm going to listen to colleagues and be aware of different skills. And I think most of those doing global health research do that. We work enough with colleagues from different cultures to know that that's the case. but I think that the humility needs to come amongst us, sort of working on the ground. But maybe if I put my other hat on as a sort of a global health leader, I also need to be humble as well and listen to those on the ground, because the more senior you get, the less you sort of lose touch with people on the ground. So the less you, a lot of my global health work I do, I'm not traipsing around with my rucksack in Uganda anymore, staying with local people. I'm sat in air-conditioned ivory towers in the UK, and it is very easy for us to lose touch, I think, with the reality on the ground. And I think as global health leaders, we need to then be humble to listen to the opinions not only of those who are in the British system and working alongside people of other cultures, but also those from overseas. I think there's an interesting example, and I think including patients is a very important component, a way in which this can be done. I remember there was a discussion about IVF in low resource settings. Should you do IVF in Uganda? Now, the standard answer would be, of course you shouldn't. Overpopulation is a problem. IVF is far too expensive. £3,000, it's a waste of money, etc., etc. And it's far more important to do population control. And what's interesting is that when you speak to people on the ground, actually they say, if you speak to a woman in Uganda and you say, well, how important is infertility to you as compared to reducing the number of cesarean sections you have? Oh, fertility is far more important an issue, because that's a living death often for people with infertility. But we as the global leaders say, no, that's not your problem. You don't need any kind of interventions to deal with infertility. And to me, that has hints of colonial attitudes there, saying, yes, dear, but we know better. We know better. I know that you want infertility treatments, but we'll decide what you need. And I think so. That's a sort of, maybe it's a silly example, but it's an example of ways in which you can, if you bring in women's voices from the villages, if you bring them into decision making, it often disorders your priority. James Tatai, who I think is part of this conference, is doing a very important piece of work in Uganda at the moment, going around villages to ask what their health priorities are. And often they're not heard at WHO levels, they're not heard at high decision-making levels, and they need to be. Yeah. They need to be.
Oh, well, thank you very much for your answers, some great learning points, some great points I'm sure we'll discuss in the panel later on. So thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks very much, Maddie.
Bye.
Bye.
That was it. Thank you. Okay, so we've just heard from Bhavna, Percy and Professor Weeks there, who have given 3 short interviews on the topic of decolonising global health. And I think it was really great to hear different people's opinions and perspectives of global health. So I'd like to say thanks again for joining us today and doing that. And we're now joined by Priyanka and Rachel, who are medical students at the University of Liverpool. We all study at the University of Liverpool together, and we're all members of the SNOGS committee who are running this session today. So hi girls, thanks for joining us today. We're now going to have a bit of a panel discussion and a roundup of what we've heard from Abby and Jaden and Denise and the interviews just then. So kind of as students, medical students, we do have quite limited experience in global health and global health research, and especially in decolonising global health. But I would like to ask you kind of from today's session, what were the main points that have stuck out with you and been important for you today? Rachel, would you like to start?
Yeah, so I think today's been really, really helpful, because before today, I'd never really heard about the term decolonizing global health and what it really meant. And even until today, it took a while for me to really understand it and acknowledge what the main issue is and what we as individuals can do to help. I think it's really important to acknowledge that as individuals we can help and we can start to make a difference and change people's perspectives on what it really means. Even though it's on a global level, I think it's important to introduce these themes early into our teaching. Like you say, we don't have a lot of global health teaching at university, and certainly nothing to do with decolonizing global health. So I think the earlier you understand it, the better, because it will shape us as medical students and it will shape us as future doctors and researchers as well.
Yeah. And what about you, Priyanka?
I think today's been really, really useful, just because I've never had the opportunity to learn about decolonizing global health, understand what it is, never even had a conversation about it. Going throughout my whole education, from primary, secondary, even now in university, I've never once ever had a conversation or teaching about what colonization has resulted in, how it's shaped our everyday lives and the people who are involved in it. Even today, like, it's all around us, the frameworks that we're involved in, the decisions that we make, the people that we interact with, it affects us on a daily basis, but we don't have these conversations. And it's just made me think, well, why? And if we are going to have these conversations, they need to start early, because there's only so much we can do by having a single conversation, like a seminar or like a panel interview today. But how many people is that going to reach? And possibly just because we're more interested in it, that's why we're having these conversations and that's why we're willing to listen. So I think today has really, it's going to stay with me, and it's going to make me go forward and educate myself more.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to do the same, and I think that it's a really good step to take. And yeah, it just like opens your eyes to what's going on, because sometimes I feel, especially at university, everything's quite like fast paced and you just kind of get pushed along and there's so much to take in, and sometimes you don't really understand why things have happened, or especially in research, like you just kind of go with it. And it's a bit like Prof Weeks was saying, like higher level people make these decisions, but as students we kind of just go along with that. But we're going to be like future doctors, future researchers, so I do think it's important that we understand what's going on with, and like you said, the frameworks that we're part of. So yeah, I agree, I've got a lot to learn, but I think it's really important that we're having these conversations. So kind of like going back to us being students, how important do you think this is to us, and how do you think that we can maybe move forward and help and educate others and things like that? Rachel, do you have any ideas?
I think it's hugely important. I think it's, like you say, all about being humble and appreciating that even though eventually we hope to become consultants and go up that hierarchy, that you should never lose that ability to help anyone, no matter what stage they are in their life. And I think it's really important with this on a global scale to appreciate that some of the bigger implementations that you would put into a community or a country won't necessarily benefit the individual. And whilst that's really important on a global scale, I think we can put that into our daily lives as individuals as well, and treat every patient and individual with that same respect, and not always assume that we know what's right for them and we assume their needs straight away. People know what they need and know what they want, and I think that's really important for the individual or for the bigger picture to take that into account. So I think it's really, really important as medical students, and like you say, to bring that in so much earlier, so we can appreciate that from the moment we enter this profession and career.
So that's kind of a little bit about what Prof Weeks was saying with the fertility comment, and how people in big offices might think, no, we're not going to give fertility treatment in this context, but actually that's really important to that community. And I think that we need to be respectful and be aware of that, especially when it comes to dealing with patients. But yeah, do you think, Priyanka, coming to you, kind of with the Black Lives Matter movements here, especially in the UK, that has driven people's attitudes to change? Can you see things progressing and improving?
I think that, especially over these last few months, the energy and the voice that the Black Lives Matter movement has engaged, I think it's been really good, because it's everywhere and it is in people's faces, but we need that to be in people's faces. But I also think that we can't become complacent with it, that everything kind of blew up and then we're just going to leave it there. We need to carry that forward, whether or not it's trying to understand why the movement has gained so much energy behind it. But also we can't be performative in what we do. We can say, oh yeah, it's not all lives matter, it's Black Lives Matter, and I'm going to apply that to my learning and my interactions on a daily basis. I'm going to take it through with my profession. There's so much you can say that, but you actually have to understand it or go out of your way to actually apply it to yourself, because I feel like so many people will just glaze over it, oh, that's been there and gone, it doesn't matter now, everyone's on the same page. Well, no, not really. We can learn new things and also unlearn all these behaviours as well.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point. This is kind of unlearning, or it's getting to the root and understanding, because we are today, research and medicine today is why it is, because of colonialisation. So we need to understand that before we can maybe move forward. And so I think that's why today has been really interesting. Something that I'm wondering is, I don't want to be focusing too much on our opinions in the UK, and I do wonder how, we have loads of viewers today from all over the world, and I wonder how big the movements are in, especially maybe in Africa. Are these important issues over there? Do people where the global health research is happening think that this is a problem? I'd be really interested to know. Or again, is this performatism, us thinking, right, we're going to solve these problems that we've caused? But I think we really need to understand how other people feel about it as well. So that's just something that I think would be an interesting thing to look into as well. Obviously, we can't really do that now, right this second, but something to think about for the future.
An important consideration that you're making, because we're all in a privileged position, being able to sit in our homes, in our day-to-day lives in the UK, and be okay, yeah, we're going to talk about this today, but is it really affecting us on a daily basis? That's what it does, but are we at the receiving end of it necessarily?
Yeah,
we can carry on talking about it, but unless we actually do something, things really change.
And I think that's why it's so important I think someone said it earlier, that we're not just involving the people it's meant to be benefiting, but giving them the platform, giving them the freedom of speech to tell us what they need. It's all well and good us going there and telling, here's the problems, we're going to fix it, but it's not us who are going to understand the true issues at hand, and we're not going to understand what they need and want. And I think it's not just about involving them, it's giving them that platform to have the freedom to speak and make those decisions.
Well, I really think that kind of as students who have to undertake research is a massive part of medicine. We have to understand what's going on all over the world. Hopefully, as future doctors, we can all kind of make that change, and I think we can all advocate it. We can even doing sessions like this are really important, getting discussions going, and I'm sure we can keep it going in our committee and keep the conversation going like be as diverse as we can be and include as many people, hear people's voices. And we've had talks through our SNOGS committee recently about how the inequalities in obs and gynae, and there are a lot still, and especially with COVID at the moment, that's really kind of amplifying the kind of health inequalities, for example, like the BAME community, or kind of how Black women access maternal care and things like that. And it's really important, and I think that I'm really proud that as students and a student committee we can kind of get these conversations going now, and I'm really positive about the future as we are discussing it and becoming aware of it, and like Prof Weeks said, kind of like trying to stay humble, but we just need everybody to become on board with that as well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really great talking to you and rounding up what's been a really great session. And thank you to everybody that has listened, and I hope you've enjoyed it. We've really enjoyed putting this talk together and researching the topic, and we've learned a lot. I hope you guys have too. So I'm going to say bye for now, and thanks so much for listening, everybody. Bye.